Strategize your content marketing from start to finish with Adam Kosloff, episode 208. Are you ready to make your law firm a profit-generating machine that will free up your time and skyrocket your impact? With more than 2 decades of business growth experience and having proven that you can be successful while prioritizing your family and your impact, introducing the Profit with Law podcast. I am your host, the creator of the Firm Differentiator 10X Effect, Moshe Amsel. Well, hello and welcome to another amazing guest interview here on the Profit with Law podcast. I'm your host, Moshe Amsel, and I'm excited for the guest that I'm bringing to you today. The reason I'm excited is because one of the biggest struggles that we have as business owners, and specifically attorneys who are trying to manage their time in a highly productive manner, is how do I get content out into the world, and how do I do it in a way that allows me to still be the persona of my website, of my social, everything that we're doing, but at the same time not have to dedicate all of my time to marketing efforts, which is, that's the sweet spot. Attorneys need to focus on client work so they can collect on that work. But at the same time, we have to worry about where's the next client coming from. And that's why I'm excited about the conversation we're about to have. Now, I had my first call with Adam, our guest, when I was at the park with the kids. And we had a great conversation. Typically, those intro calls last for 15 minutes, and that was a significantly longer call, if I remember correctly, because we totally hit it off. And I think that Adam is a great person and a great personality, and I think you're going to really enjoy the conversation we're about to embark on. So let me tell you a little bit about our guest. Adam Kosloff is the founder and CEO of Virtuoso Content. He's a Yale University educated TV and web writer, and he founded Virtuoso Content to perform online content writing for attorneys. So he specifically works with law firms in creating their content, and we're going to have an entire conversation all around that. I'm super excited for that opportunity. Now, before I bring Adam on, I'm just going to take a moment and share some words from our sponsors who make this show possible. Please give them some love, check out their offer, and see if it's for you. Finding amazing employees is the toughest job for any business, and especially for a law firm. You deserve to be the law firm owner you've always wanted to be, but you can't get there without a great team. Get Staffed Up helps you build your all-star team by staffing your law firm with incredible full-time offshore virtual assistants. Work with Get Staffed Up to save money and your biggest resource, time, while they find you the best English-speaking VAs in the world. Hashtag delegate your way to freedom. Learn more at www.getstaffedup.com/VIP. Make sure to enter Profit with Law or Moshe Amsel in the referred by section for a $500 discount off of your first VA hire. Thanks to our sponsor, Smith AI. Smith AI is a superior virtual receptionist service for small businesses. They specialize in working with solo and small law firms. I discovered Smith AI a couple of years ago and was blown away by the range of services, which are available at a cost any attorney, even those of you in the smallest solo practice, can afford. Their friendly receptionists respond to potential clients in English or Spanish, screen and schedule new leads, and even take payment for consults. The best part is, they don't just handle these conversations by phone. They also have live agents and chatbots capturing leads on websites and via text message. If there's one growth hack to your practice, this is it. Smith's friendly gatekeepers can staff your front lines. They'll capture new leads while you work uninterrupted. You can finally have the peace of mind that while you're working, you're not missing out on future work. Plans start at just $210 a month for calls and $140 a month for chats. They even offer a totally free chatbot, so there's no excuse. Try Smith AI today and see for yourself why attorneys like Justy Nickel in Colorado say Smith AI receptionists are the secret to business growth and client happiness. Smith AI offers a free trial, and podcast listeners
can get an extra $100 discount with promo code ProfitLaw100. That's ProfitLaw100. Sign up and learn more at www.smith.ai. Trust me when I say, don't let another day go by. Try Smith AI.
All right, welcome back. Adam, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Moshe. I'm so grateful to be here. And that was such a generous introduction. I loved your first call. It was great. You're in the park and very fun.
Yeah, and I'm really intrigued with the work that you're doing because, marketing agencies, they approach something strictly from an SEO perspective. And, I'm excited to see how you approach content writing when you're coming at it from a writer's perspective, as opposed to necessarily a marketer. Not that you're not doing marketing, but I'd like to see where those differences are. And we've had a bunch of marketers here on the podcast in the past, so our listeners will be able to see that contrast. And I want to dive into that. But before we do that, I gave you an intro, but probably didn't do you justice. And people want to know, who the heck is this Adam guy? So paint a picture for me. Let me know a little bit about yourself and how you ended up writing for attorneys.
Yeah, thank you so much. So the nickel version is this. From some strange eclectic background. I went to Yale. I got a degree in geophysics. And then after I graduated, I decided to move to Los Angeles to be a screenwriter, which is, my parents were like, why did you get a degree in physics for this? But I did. I've written for TV. I wrote for Mel Brooks on the show Spaceballs, the animated series, and had a bunch of other, written some movies and TV shows. But as a day job, I started writing for the web in around 2003, I think. And since then, I've probably written, 50,000 pages for the web and several hundred books. At one point, I thought I'm one of the most prolific web writers at least OG web writers. For my wedding, for instance, I wrote, I think 700 pages in 3 weeks to try to pay for my wedding. And so that really hurt my hands. But so then I got into the legal. Meanwhile, along the way, in around 2009, I got really into the low carbohydrate keto diets, and I sort of like the nutrition science behind these. And I had a kind of a third thing where I started blogging about that, and I've actually spoken at conferences. So I had these three very disparate things, like the screenwriting or animation, web writing, and the keto thing. And I decided, having a bunch of kids, I'm like, you know what, I should really try and take one of these areas and turn it into something. So I turned my freelance career into a company, and I created Virtuoso from that around 8 years ago. And we've grown now. We have about, I think, 40 writers, a lot of attorneys. And the gist of Virtuoso is like, let's create content people really can be proud of, and do it in a way that minimizes how many red lines and edits they have to do. So the theme of the company is no suffering, so that nobody involved in the process should suffer. The reader should be like, this is good content, I'm happy, I've learned something. The client should be like, this is an easy process, we've done well. The writer should be like, I've been paid well, this is like a nice process, a good culture, like we're not having to do tons of edits on a Saturday night. And so this idea of no suffering content is something that I think is in contrast to the world of journalism, which I came up in, which is journalism is the idea of like, we're just going to write tons and tons of copy for Google, and who cares what it is, and let's do it quickly, and who cares about you? You're like a drone. So it's like the contrast of that, like, let's make this process no suffering, because I feel like at the end of the day, life is short, and this will be more valuable anyway. And I feel like I've been somewhat vindicated, because the old school way of doing content, where you're just churning out stuff, has been debunked. I mean, Google and Facebook and these other places, they don't care as much about your search terms anymore. They care about, like, are you doing valuable content? Is this interesting? Is this like really a new thing? And so this kind of approach, I think, is gaining some traction. So I feel somewhat happy about that. So that's the kind of the version of my company. And I feel like we've got a model now, and I'm just trying to expand now and trying to build it out without kind of breaking things. That's my goal.
Now, I have a lot of questions that are coming up, but sure. and I'm actually going to start with the end first, and then we'll work our way backwards. So somebody, uses you to create this content for them, and they've got this content machine happening, right?
Yeah.
There's the writing of the content and hoping that people are going to find it when they search for it. But then there's also the promotion of the content. And how do I tell people who already know about me, who already want to know, hey, what's the next thing I'm writing about? is there a process for sharing the content that you get involved in, or is that something where they're kind of like, okay, they've got to have a social media manager, they have to have a newsletter they're producing, they have to do that post work to figure out, how do I disseminate this content to as many different platforms and as many people as possible?
That's a fantastic question. It kind of gets to the root of what I'm struggling with right now in the company. Because, frankly, I'm like, okay, we'll stick to the knitting. I can do the content well. We can really make this content good. But then the question is, yeah, it needs to plug into the rest of your marketing, right? It doesn't exist in a vacuum. And so far, we can help with basic uploading and things like that if people need it. But yeah, in terms of promoting it on Facebook, metrics, how this plugs into what's going on with your general strategy, we haven't done that. And I've done that as a deliberate choice because it's easy once you start getting clients in a business to sort of expand into areas that you don't know that well, but that are adjacent. Like my father-in-law is constantly saying, you should do web design. And I'm like, well, I don't really know web design. And he says, well, you can find a company that does web design and partner with them. And that's all true. And I may go that route. But for now, I've kind of siloed myself. And I don't know if that's a good idea. I mean, I'm sure I'm missing out. And not only sure I'm missing out of business, but I feel like attorneys would like to have that piece, because I think a lot of what's going on with your lawyer, I mean, I know from my own business, it's you just want to give this to someone else and be you do it, just get it done. I don't want to think about it. And it'd be nice, but I mean, I'm not a full service marketing agency.
Right. And you know what? And I think that there's a disconnect between the posting of stuff and things like that, how do we promote this there's an art to extracting the key points or the ways to talk about the article that was written that would pique somebody's interest to say, hey, let me go read this article.
Yeah.
And I kind of feel like the person or the writer that's writing it is the best person to be in the position to create that intrigue, to know how to create those bullet points. So I'm just wondering if, and I might be just giving you an idea here, but maybe if you have the ability to take the blog post and now create some quotables from it and some intriguing
headlines or topics, or just
the headline, it's to a post that's going to get somebody to read the rest of the post. And I imagine that if you added that to the what I'm delivering with this piece of content, an attorney, a law firm can now run with it, because they can easily have a graphic designer. They can easily have somebody who knows how to do the monkey work of posting something, even if it's, I don't want to call it monkey work. I don't want to offend anybody, but when I say monkey work, I mean work that can have a process that somebody can easily follow and be given instructions to follow it, and doesn't require any brain power to think about how to do it. So if the brain power is in the content itself, so if you create the content and the ways to deliver that content, there's no more thinking. Now it's just executing. And that's, that piece anybody can do. They can do it in-house. They can have somebody on Fiverr. They can go and get an offshore VA that does it. There's so many options that they now have to have someone else manage all the rest of the social content and interaction.
Yeah.
But they don't need to have a high quality brainiac or writer in-house to now disseminate what you've already done to create that next step.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And it's one of those things it seems like an easy leap, right? Okay, if you're writing content, you can promote it. I mean, the one thing that's kind of obviously held me back is I've just been so busy, and there's new people and I'm trying to recruit and trying to perfect this one piece of the system, because there's a lot to writing good content. It's actually somewhat complicated. And it's okay, well, I could definitely make, sell more services, make more money, help more people if I could somehow, and here's our promotion process. We do this. We'll post it on Facebook. We'll respond to your comments, whatever. And it just there's a lot to it. And maybe I want to kind of dip into it with some basic services along the lines that you're talking about. I would think that's a really good thing that I'd like to do.
Yeah. And I, first of all, kudos and hats off to you, because I believe that getting really niche with what you do is the secret to success. I don't think that you branch out to add things to it until when somebody says, hey, I need to hire a content writer for my blog, your name is the one that's coming up.
Right.
When you've conquered the market to the point where, 90% of the time when somebody's looking for a content writer, they're sending people are saying, oh, you got to go check out Virtuoso, like that's where they're sending people. That's when you're like, okay, now I've got this piece of the market. Everybody knows is what we do. Now I can layer on and add this next thing. The only reason I'm asking or pushing or recommending this extra step is because I feel like for the writer, it probably doesn't take a lot more time or effort to come up with those few deliverables, and that would be an immense value add to what you're already doing. So
we've done it. Some people
might be
like, they want to add like a Facebook thing or like a little blurb. We're going to promote it on LinkedIn or Facebook. Like, can you add like a paragraph or something, or like teaser copy? We do that.
Right.
I mean, I think what's interesting to me is like, theory versus like experience. My experience with a lot of working with, I don't know, hundreds of people at this point, is that people are very different places. Like some attorneys are like, I'm a solo attorney. I spoke with this woman yesterday. She's like, I don't know anything. Like, I need to upload it. I don't, know. And I'm like, in those kind of cases, I'm like, look, I'm happy to do this service for you, but I really want you to succeed. And so you're going to need to find a way to plug this into marketing and measure it. Like, I want you to succeed. So you've got to tell me.
Right.
And other people are like, great, we have the content, we're ready to go. We have a whole team. So it's like the whole gamut. And it's just interesting.
Yeah, and speaking to your what was it, your father or your father-in-law who was saying that you should do websites? Yeah. So speaking to your conversation with him, these are opportunities for you to find strategic partners that you partner with a marketing agency where now the work can flow both ways. They might not have good content writers on staff. They might not do a good job of actually creating content, but their job is not the creation of the content. Their job is the dissemination of the content and making sure that it is really honed in on the keywords that you want to promote to. It wouldn't make sense for the writers to be worried about that. The writers need to create really good, compelling content that a reader wants to read. Then the marketing agency cares about what the algorithm wants to read, which is different than what the reader wants to read. So I think that the first step is understanding these are two separate things. And I think that you're really clear about that. And there's definitely opportunity to create the path for people so that they don't have to figure it out themselves. One of the biggest challenges I have, as I do coaching for law firms, is I tell them, hey, look, it's clear you need to hire somebody.
Right.
Now, what's the next step? So I have to have in my back pocket, here's a virtual paralegal service that you can use. Here's a virtual VA service that you can use. Here's a service that helps you with creating a job post and finding the right person and getting them on board in the first 90 days. And I've got all these partners that I have relationships with that I now can deliver as I'm not the expert. I don't make believe I'm the expert in any of these areas, but you need to hire somebody. So instead of me saying, hey, you have to hire somebody, now go figure out how to do that, I'm going to say, you need to hire somebody, and here's your menu of options. And I've already done the research, and here are the best providers for you to use. Just decide which one you're going to do, start the conversation, and execute. And I kind of feel like if you give them that path, you give them the, hey, I don't do this, but we have an alliance with this company, you do, go there and do that. I think that it removes a lot of resistance in the conversation of, hey, how do I get started with this?
Yeah, that's a really good point. And again, so to John's point, like, I mean, that's something like I really got to do soon. I mean, I have had some relations. I have a few web designers I use or recommend, and like, people who need to publish their books. I have a company that I know that they can do that, and or like trying to take a book that I've written and use it to generate leads on Facebook. I can recommend someone to do that. But yeah, I like the idea of like having this umbrella of options that you can do. It's really good. It's really good. I mean, I think, and we'll see how it expands. Maybe I'll take on some of those services myself eventually. Who knows?
Awesome. All right. So we talked about the end. Let's move back earlier in the process, because I think that that's really where, I mean, first of all, that's where your wheelhouse is. So that's where we should focus. But I also think that this is a place of intrigue to people who are listening. Like, how do I hand over to somebody else to write for me? So I think the first question that they want to know is, well, how are you writing authoritative pieces on legal content when I'm the lawyer you're
And I'm
not.
not. I'm the physics guy who's not a lawyer.
Exactly. And then the right behind it is whose name is on this, right? Am I the author or are you the author?
Yeah. Well, often it's everything we do is ghostwritten. I mean, I ghostwrote a piece for Newsweek a few years ago, and it was about like for the sex crisis in the church, the Catholic Church, some lawyer, Paul something. But basically, it's all ghostwritten. And I think before we get into the nuts and bolts of like the how and what, my first question is usually like, why? Like, what are you trying to accomplish? Well, I need to write content. And it's kind of like, well, why? Why do you think you need to write the content? Because part of it is like, listen, I'm happy to write as much content as people want. It's good for me. It's good for my business. But I want to see people succeed. And so I want to know how this is plugging into their general, not just the marketing, but like their plan, their life. They're trying to grow a firm. They're trying to make money. They're trying to make their life easier. And a lot of lawyers suffer. It's a big thing in the legal world, a problem, which is like it's kind of a culture of suffering. And it's like, okay, well, how do we not do this? And how does the content fit with that? And I think, because sometimes, people might think I need to do this content, and then like I'll have a conversation with them, and they'll realize like, no, you don't. You don't need to do any content, or you need to do this first. You need to have a website, or you need to like understand your niche. So once you kind of like suss that out, then it's a question of, okay, there's a bunch of ways. There's only a few ways you can do it. One is you can do it yourself. You can hire someone in-house, like, or have one of your paralegals or other attorneys or admins do it. You can use a company like mine or agency like mine. You can find a freelance writer. You can defer doing it until a later time. And what are some other options? Basically, you have these options. And the question is, what's right for you now? If you're doing it yourself, you're saving money, but you're burning your time. And that's not really sustainable for the long term, unless you're going to be like a super thought leader, unless you're like, I am the expert in the entire world already on like, I don't know, like, marijuana defense or something. And
I want to interrupt you for 1 second. So folks, if you want to know what working with a freelance writer is like, we have a podcast episode we did way back when in the early days of the show. It's episode number 28. You can go to profitwithlaw.com/028 using a freelance writer for your law firm with Laura, for your law firm blog with Laura Pennington Briggs. Now, Laura Briggs is now working for Lawyerist. So I don't think she's doing freelance writing anymore. I could be wrong. But that was a great conversation. So if you want to understand the difference or what a freelance writer does, that's different than an agency, definitely go and check out that episode. Sorry, back to the
No, that's a great point.
Here.
That's a great point. And listen, I mean, part of the thing is like, I always want to know is like, sometimes the solution is to use a freelance writer. Sometimes it's an agency, sometimes it's in-house. And there's no like universal rules. And so what I would say is like, kind of, you have to understand your standards. What's your budget? What are you trying to accomplish? I mean, the advantages of having someone in-house is that you have a lot more control. You can talk to this person whenever. The disadvantage is you're stealing resources from yourself. And frankly, like, unless you've hired a really great writer, they're probably not going to be as good of a writer as you can get with like Laura, someone who does this all the time, or like an agency like mine where you have like people who are like highly specific. The advantages to working with someone like Laura, like individual, is that it's often cheaper. There's like, as you're working with an agency, like I've hired other lawyers. And so there's like, because I have internal costs, like my margin, I have to charge more than someone like that. So if you're really looking to save on costs, if that's like your main concern, you're like, I want to do this, I don't want to have to do it myself, I want to find a writer, I would recommend doing the freelance writer route. And there's some websites you can look at. I would say there's Writer Access, which I found some good writers. You can look on Fiverr, you can look on Upwork. The danger there is that like, you don't know who you're going to get necessarily. And like, writers can be difficult. A lot of writers tend to be very introspective and like they're the opposite of extroverted and not like customer service oriented. I mean, I don't mean to knock writers, but like, I found this to be true that like, we're working with people like that, you have these writers who are really good, but then they get, they have an ego in the sense of like, I don't like this, and they get mad, or like they're not responsive. And so that can be a problem. Not all writers are like this, but that, you don't quite know what you're going to get. Working with an agency, you're going to have this interface where someone's going to be like, we are catering to you, we're here for you, you don't like this, we'll revise it immediately. Like, it's a kind of a set it and forget it mentality. Also, like, the problem is one issue with freelance writers or hiring someone in staff is like, there's different pieces of it, right? Not only do you need the writing to be good and SEO'd and what have you, but it also needs, and the right tone and the right style, but it also, you need to have good ideas. Like, I think one thing that I feel like pride myself on a little bit is being able to come up with ideas that people are not going to think of. And this is kind of my screenwriting background. I've done a lot of product naming. I love coming up with concepts that are kind of fresh. And I think in order to stand out, especially if you're going to be blogging, you need to have like, why are people going to click? We've talked about how many articles about divorce are there online, like a trillion. So what's the new angle that you're going to get people to click? And so I like doing that stuff. I think even if you have a good writer, you need stuff to write about. So that's another consideration. So all that being said, I'm going to give
something that you said triggered my recollection that we have another podcast interview that I want to draw our listeners' attention to, because I had a conversation with Diane Faulkner. The title of the episode is "Why You Need to Hire a Ghostwriter for Your Business," and something that you said about the fact that an individual writer is going to be more selective and specific with who they want to work with. And that's something that came up in that conversation with Diane, was how specific she is with who she works with. She only works with a select small few clients because that's all it's necessary for her to have her business. It's episode 172. So folks, if you want to check it out, go to profitwithlaw.com/172. That's a more recent conversation. But to your point, I think that it's really important to understand, like, where am I, right? Do I have the budget to spend on another resource, or do I need to keep it in-house because I'm already spending money on the internal resource and that's the best use of that resource for right now? At the same time, it's easy to say, oh, I'll just have somebody in-house do it. But to your point, they probably are not going to be creating as high quality content as somebody who's a writer for a living. So I would be really cautious and really careful about choosing that option, because they might be really good. Some people just have a knack for it. Some people just are good at it, even though that's not the main thing they do. Mm-hmm. And they might love doing it. It might be something that'll help mix up what their responsibilities are. But to your point, you're probably getting the lawyer or the paralegal to do it. And those are people who you might be billing by the hour. Right. So if they're spending an hour writing, they're not spending that hour billing. And therefore, it's not just, oh, I'm internalizing the cost. I'm also creating a situation where they cannot use that hour to bill somebody else. So we need to be really cautious with the opportunity cost of using an in-house resource versus the savings of needing to spend on somebody else. Now, clearly, if you have a 40-hour week, full-time person working 40 hours a week, and you only have 30 hours a week of work to give them, then they've got that 10 hours. They've got the time to do that. So you have to look at your situation for that. I really love the idea of being able to outsource things like this. Yeah. I really think that the true growth engine in a law firm is the ability to be able to get as many things as possible off of the plate of the owner.
Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah.
I was going to agree with that, like, very, like, strenuously. Like, I would say, and this, I took this course from this guy, Rich Sheffrin, who's like an online business guru. He's taught all these famous online marketers, and he's very instrumental in like helping me build Virtuoso. One of the things he, said, like, often the solution in your business is really a person. Like, yeah, you can get stuff out of a box, you can do this, but it's really a person who's going to own that area, who's going to take it over for you, because you can only be strong in so many places. And I found this to be very true in my business. I got to work with this amazing woman, Melody, who does project management for the Navy. I tend to be all over the place. I generate a lot of stuff. It's hard for me to complete things and execute. I can do it, but Melody was able to come in and like organize the system so everything flows. And it's like, I could not have done that myself. Like, I needed Melody. Like, I could have tried to learn this stuff myself, but I needed her. And it's like, I think it's an advantage to finding, whether it's a Laura type freelancer or an agency, or even someone you hire. It's essentially, it's like, you want, a person who is an expert in the area is always the best solution, not a product out of a box. And one thing that can really help.
Adam, I want to interrupt you for a second. Are you familiar with this book? I'm holding up Traction by Gino Wickman, for those of you listening and not watching this episode. So in the book Traction, Gino introduces this concept of, at the top of a company, there are two roles. There's a visionary and an integrator. Yeah. The visionary is the person who's got the vision, who's got all the good ideas, but they cannot execute completely on those ideas because they're completely disorganized. The visionary, in order to be a visionary, they have to be scattered. Like, That's just the way that they operate.
Yeah.
And the integrator is, they don't care what the vision is. You tell them what needs to get done, and they will organize it and make sure that it happens. And that's what you're describing with you and Melanie, is that you're the visionary, she's your integrator.
Yeah.
And that's really when you unlock your potential, is when you separate those two roles. And when you're first starting, you have no choice, right? You're it. So you're both, and you kind of step into those roles. But at some point, you have to figure out which one of those two you are. Now, some people really don't have vision, and they're an integrator. They're like, I'll organize to the nth degree. I'll make sure everything's getting done. But ask me what my strategy is for the next year, I have no clue. Right. I can't even imagine what it might be. So sometimes you got to bring in the visionary. Usually it's the visionary that starts the business, because usually you're starting the law firm because you imagine that you can do better than we're working for somebody else, which is already a vision. So usually the person starting the business is the visionary, and then they have to partner or bring in an integrator. And this is why some of the fastest growing small law firms are the ones that start with two attorneys, where they're partners. And one of them is like, yeah, I'll do the marketing and all the business development, and you do all the attorney work. What's really happening there is the one who says, I'll do all the marketing and the business development, that's the visionary. Right. He's the one who's got the ideas, who can go out there and execute on those. And then the other one is the one who's like, okay, let me just go and run shop. And that's, you naturally created this phenomenon. And that's why they succeed so much faster than somebody who starts by themselves, because those two roles don't go together. You have to separate them.
Finding amazing employees is the toughest job for any business, and especially for a law firm. You deserve to be the law firm owner you've always wanted to be, but you can't get there without a great team. Get Staffed Up helps you build your all-star team by staffing your law firm with incredible full-time offshore virtual assistants. Work with Get Staffed Up to save money and your biggest resource, time, while they find you the best English-speaking VAs in the world. #delegate your way to freedom. Learn more at www.getstaffedup.com/VIP. Make sure to enter Profit with Law or Moshe Amsel in the Referred By section for a $500 discount off of your first VA hire. Thanks to our sponsor, Smith AI. Smith AI is a superior virtual receptionist service for small businesses. They specialize in working with solo and small law firms. I discovered Smith AI a couple of years ago and was blown away by their range of services, which are available at a cost any attorney, even those of you in the smallest solo practice, can afford. Their friendly receptionists respond to potential clients in English or Spanish, screen and schedule new leads, and even take payment for consults. The best part is, they don't just handle these conversations by phone. They also have live agents and chatbots capturing leads on websites and via text message. If there's one growth hack to your practice, this is it. Smith's friendly gatekeepers can staff your front lines. They'll capture new leads while you work uninterrupted. You can finally have the peace of mind that while you're working, you're not missing out on future work. Plans start at just $210 a month for calls and $140 a month for chats. They even offer a totally free chatbot, so there's no excuse. Try Smith AI today and see for yourself why attorneys like Justin Nickel in Colorado say Smith AI receptionists are the secret to business growth and client happiness. Smith AI offers a free trial, and podcast listeners can get an extra $100 discount with promo code PROFITLAW100. That's PROFITLAW100. Sign up and learn more at www.smith.ai. Trust me when I say, don't let another day go by. Try Smith AI.
And it's like I found this to be very true for myself. And it's like the other thing is like I'm very unbalanced. Like I'm very much towards the visionary. Like I'm gonna come up with ideas. Like, and it's not like I'm it's very difficult for me to execute. I was able to do it because I'm disciplined. But it's like until I found someone like Melody, like I couldn't do it. And I think I don't know. I was going to say there's one thing that will help. I think a heuristic I use that I think is very helpful for the content or the other kind of law stuff. And I got this from David Allen, who's this productivity guru. He came up with a getting things done system. But basically, when you're trying to figure out, okay, the problem is I need to do content. Okay. So like, I want to do, whether it's blog writing, newsletter writing, writing a book, writing an article for a journal. Okay. So that's your project. The first step is you want to know why. You first ask, why am I doing this? Like, so you can have clarity and purpose. And that's like, you can do this, and I do this in a Microsoft Word document. I often write down like, why do I want to do this thing? Write an answer. And usually your first answer is good enough. The next thing you do is really cool. You want to establish your standards of success. And the way to do this, and this is Alan's idea, so I'm stealing it from him, is you ask yourself, if I had to hand over this project to somebody else I don't know, what would they tell them to do and not do? And then you make a list. I would say, it needs to be this budget. I need it to be done by this time, amount of time. I want it to look like this. And so you list all of your standards of like how this could go wrong, how this is going to violate your standards. We all these standards, but we never really articulate them. So now you have why you're doing it, what your standards are. And then from there, you can start to say, okay, well, then you get creative. You're like, okay, well, what are some ways I could do, rather than try to, force an answer? You're like, okay, well, imagining this is successful from a point of completion. I've already finished it. What's happened? Like, what does this look like? How do I feel? How does the firm feel? And so it might be like, I have saved, I'm not touching the content at all. My blogs are going up every month and they're fantastic. And I don't even have to look at them because I know they're in my voice. It's not costing me that much money and I'm getting leads from them. Things like that where you're like, what it is. And then once you have your purpose, your standards, and now you have your vision, then you can go ahead and like, okay, now I've done the what are big picture work. Then you can be like, well, who can I do this with? Like, what's the first step? What's the next step? And doing it in that order in a very kind of deliberate way is a lot easier. And it is like, it's going to help you because like, when you're trying to figure out, do I have a, in-house or a freelancer or an agency or myself, like, or do I not do this? That's a tool you can use to figure it out yourself. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It makes a lot of sense. And that's a great way to organize it and to be able to hand something off. All right, we went down a little bit of a rabbit hole here, and I want to reemerge and come back to the core conversation that we were having, which is around this idea of, okay, where do I go to create this content? And I had gone back and revisited this. Hey, you might not want to use an in-house resource. Something else that you mentioned is that, when you're looking for something, you have to be clear on what your niche is or who your target market is, so that you can talk to them, so that you can write the right content for them. Now, is it the content writer's job typically to figure out what to write on? Or is it typically the attorney that's saying, hey, here are here's a list of 100 topics that, that would make sense for my audience, and then, go and run with it? Or is it really, hey, here's my audience. This is who I am looking to find as potential clients for my law firm. Go talk to them.
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, in my experience, it's probably like 70-30, where 70% of my clients are like, what do I write about? And 30% of my other clients are like, I have a very specific ideas. I'm going to write this. And so if they have ideas, we execute them and like to the best of our ability to try and make sure that's like perfectly aligned with like what the tone and the length and everything. But if they're like, hey, I want to write a bunch of personal injury blogs on like brain injury, but that's all I got, then it's like, it's up to me. And people like, okay, well, let's come up with some cool things. Like, for instance, like, let me go to Google Scholar and see like what kind of brain injury drugs have kind of popped on the market in 2021. Like, we can write about that. So, trying to think about what people will care about and want to share. So sometimes the lawyers are in touch with that. Sometimes they want to give it to me and our team. And either way, we can do it. I mean, I think one of the challenges, again, if you're going to use a freelance writer who doesn't have that much experience, they might have a hard time kind of coming up with topics, even though they might be great at executing them. So that's something to consider. If you're like, look, I have got the topics in mind, I just want a writer to do them, then a freelance writer might be better. If you're like, I need to blog, but I don't know what about, then more of this kind of service might be better. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It does make sense. And it's interesting that they come to the table in both forms. To me, I would have assumed that they were all just, hey, I don't know what I want to write about, here, go write. But it does make sense. Me personally, I don't see myself as a writer, although I want to author at least one book, probably multiple books. But I just can't imagine sitting down and writing it. So at some point when my book comes out, maybe it will be ghostwritten. Who knows? We'll see. But but I have no problem getting behind a microphone and talking. So I can talk on a topic for an hour and then let a writer go and write about it instead, and I tried to navigate that for the podcast. I tried to have, the podcast not transcribed, but instead a written article that's intriguing to the reader to be written based on the content of the episode. I haven't had success yet in finding the right writer for that to make that happen. But it's, that's another question, avenue is like, what else is the law firm doing? Do they have a podcast? Do they have a YouTube channel? Do they have, because we can't assume that blogging is their only effort. Right.
Yeah. And I think for us, oftentimes people will be like, here's what we're doing marketing wise. You want to do this, and like they'll come in, we'll jump in. Okay, you're writing some emails, we'll do the emails for you. We kind of execute. Kind of like, again, I think of ourselves as like just tires. It's like, okay, you got a tire problem, we'll fix your tires. You got a content problem, we'll do your content stuff. But you definitely need that strategic insight. And I think one of the things that's important along those lines is like there's so many ways to go, and it's easy to get overwhelmed. And I think one thing is I'm trying to kind of figure out what works and do more of that. There's another chevron idea, which I always like have on my list of things to review. What's working? How can I do more of that? So if you're as an attorney and you're getting a lot of clients through some whatever method, okay, great. Why is this working? How can I do more of it? Always a good question to ask. Or I got I wrote an article and I got a bunch of clients from it, or like huge people on social media followed me. Okay, why?
I just had this in my coaching group. One of my clients was like, it's a really good month. I mean, I'm just getting clients. Like the phone's ringing and I'm signing up clients, and I'm worried that, this might be a fluke. And I said, well, yeah, your job right now is to figure out where they're coming from. Like, why are they calling you? How did they find out about you? Because you want to figure out what it is, and now lean into that. And make sure that you're doing everything you can to make that continue.
Yeah. And along those lines, I would say one thing with content is like, unlike things like pay-per-click or some other things where you can kind of immediately get a return, like can measure it, and it's all very measure. One thing with content is it's not as much about that. It's a little bit more art. And one thing you can do with it that you can't do with other kinds of marketing is you can shape your future image. So if you're like, right now I'm doing tons of bankruptcy stuff, but I would love to get high net worth divorces. I've done one case, or like, this is what I want. It's a kind of your what's the word? The aspirational goal. Mm-hmm. So you can start to blog or write books about high net worth divorces. And over time, you then you get this patina of being an expert in this area, even if you don't have that many cases, because you're going to kind of lean into it. And then that will help brand you. And over time, you become known there. So it's a way to kind of break into something that you achieve your goals or dreams in a way that you can't with other kind of marketing.
Yeah, absolutely. And the truth is that goes for all content marketing.
Yeah.
Look at this podcast, right?
Yeah.
Before I launched this podcast, I was merely an accountant with some lawyer clients. Right. But I started the podcast Profit with Law, and it almost shaped the company the way that it is. It's not like, I started the podcast knowing that I want to do coaching for law firm owners, and the accounting is kind of like an add-on at that point. It's I'm more of a coach or an advisor, and then you need some tax work and some payroll and bookkeeping, and we'll plug you into our accounting firm, and it took a path of its own, just because it created that image of who I am and what I do, because that's where people were seeing me. That's where they were hearing me. And creating that content. I think the important thing to understand is that with any sort of content marketing it's a long game. You don't just put content out there and suddenly everybody's seeing it. It takes a lot of time and effort for it to show up in the right places for the right people at the right time.
Yeah.
And, and kind of like this podcast, right? I mean, at the time I'm recording this, we're just about at exactly 2 years from when I launched my first episode.
Wow.
And in the first 3 quarters that the podcast existed, we had, I think a total of 5,000 downloads. And then the next quarter, we had 5,000 downloads in 1 quarter. And that, people don't know about it.
Mm-hmm.
And it has to start showing up in searches. It has to be something that people start to share and say, hey, check this out. They tell their friend,
right,
check out the show. I'm loving it. You should try it also. And that happens over the course of time. And it's this exponential result, right? So one person, shares the blog to one person. That person now needs to share it to another person for that to grow. When it's 1-to-1, you're only getting 2. But eventually that first share turns into 10, 20, 30 shares when you release a post a year later.
Yeah.
And, and that exponential growth happens over time. It's kind of like, the graph gets steeper as you go, as far as the growth of your readership and the eyeballs that you have on your content. So one of the things that's really hard to do is to stick with the plan.
You start to stick with a plan. It's also like, one thing is that they always say like the growth of a business or the failure of a business happens in a non-linear fashion. And even though we kind of intellectually understand what they mean with like the curve going up at a different rate, like we think our intuitions are based on linear thinking because we grew up in the savannah, like hunting whatever bison or whatever they were. We don't exponential growth is not something that's like intuitive to us. But you're totally right, and like things can kind of take off over time and surprise us in good ways, in bad ways, but yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So when you meet with a potential client and you talk about the expectations from, actually there's more to this question than as I'm asking it. I'm like, well, yeah. How often do you write for them? And right. But what, obviously they want to know, like, what's my ROI? When should I start to see results? I mean, that's, everyone wants to know, like, okay, how long do I need to be doing this before I start to see something from it? Is there any sort of metrics or some sort of expectation that you share with your clients that you say, hey, look, we're going to do this, but you got to commit to 12 months and probably we won't start seeing any results till 6 months from now. And then maybe, from 6 to 12 months, we'll start to see some traction. Your real traction is going to happen from month 12 to 24. Like what expectations do you provide?
That's a great question about ROI. And it's a conversation I've like researched and thought about so many times because again, I don't track metrics. And so I can't say that to somebody. I can't say if you blog, 4 times a week, 4 times a month for like 6 months, you're going to get this many leads and it's going to lead to this many new cases. I just can't say that because I don't have the data. I mean, the one thing I can point to is that I've had a lot of my clients stick with me for a long, long time, and I know they get cases from it. And I kind of know in general that blogging works. So, and other kinds of content work. So what I would say instead is like, it's really like, this is an important question to measure. You need to know if this is working or not. You're moving in this general direction is good. But I think as with anything in life or in business, like the ways forward, it's like, if you think this is the right thing to do, you want to take some action, in a way that's not going to kill you financially if it doesn't work. Cause you never know. You absolutely never know. And, the reality of uncertainty in business. So like you take some action. This seems like it makes sense. Like if I do this kind of process, it seems like it should work. We do it. And then based on your feedback and like what happens, you can continue or stop. Like I don't make people go at any amount of time. I mean, some people get results when they do clients really quickly. Others, like I'll blog for them for a while and they'll be like, you know what, this is not quite working. And it might be something on their end, or it might be something, whatever, who knows? And so, I mean, again, it's interesting. It's like a little bit of an aside. I just recently hired a copywriter to help me with some emails. So one of the best copywriters online, and I was comparing the kind of the data I was getting with that with my own emails. My own emails were kind of outperforming it, and I was like, well, that's interesting. And it wasn't like her fault necessarily, but I'm like,
right.
Oh, because you can make what seem like the most smart bets, but you don't know until you get there. And so it's a part of it is. The Jim Collins, the business author, came up with this idea called fire bullets and then cannonballs. And Jim Collins has done tons of research about what makes businesses succeed and fail. And his idea was basically, look, we've found from studying the literature is that like you take small bets that seem like they're going to work, you measure the results, And then if something looks really good and promising and it's delivering, then you fire a cannonball. Then you do a huge bunch of resources at something. So in practical terms, if someone's going to come to me and they're like, I don't have a legal website, I want to do blogs, I want to do 20 blogs a month, I'm going to say, that's a cannonball. You shouldn't be doing that now. You should do something small, see if it's working. And then if it's working, then let's do 20, let's do 80, whatever you want to do.
Right.
Like, I was like, how do you, I mean, in my mind, I'm always like, how do I protect the attorney from make them as efficient as possible and for not getting burned? I want to see them succeed and like, feel like they have had a good experience. And part of that is like, oftentimes saying, do less first. Do less.
Yeah, no, I totally love that. I think that's really, really powerful. And it goes along with another thing that, I mean, your experience with your copywriter, it highlights something that I talk about on the podcast all the time, which is that action creates clarity.
Yeah.
And often we sit in indecision wondering, is this going to work? Is it not going to work? Should I invest in it? Should I do this? Should I, and we have all these questions and it keeps us from moving forward, but we're guaranteeing our lack of success by not moving forward. And the reality is that if you do it and it doesn't produce the results that you expected, then you learn from that. Yeah. So you did it, it didn't produce the results. And now you can decide, okay, what does that mean? Does that mean that I don't need this person? Or does it mean that in this instance, it didn't work and I need to tweak where I'm using it to, so it is more effective in the right places. So you have to then take your lens and say, okay, what do I do with this? We just had this with the Law Firm Growth Summit. We ran it in February and we did a ton of marketing. We spent over $60,000 on Facebook ads. And the ads weren't performing at the beginning. And they weren't, I mean, even throughout and literally every $3,000-$4,000 we spent, we moved to another test. And that $60,000, actually the results that ended up working, what ended up producing was the last $10,000 or $15,000 that we spent.
Yeah.
And the rest is it's water under the bridge. It's $45,000 that poof went into the air and we have nothing to show for it, but we do, because now the next time we run the event, we don't need to do any of those tests. Yes. We know what worked. And now the next event, we can just start with what worked. And all of our marketing budget can be going specifically to producing the results that we want. So as long as you look at it from that lens, you don't have to be upset about it. One of the my friends is a stock trader, options trader. And, and he's like, look, sometimes I'll make a trade and before I know it, I'm down $50,000. Yeah. Right. And if I close out that trade at a loss, it's not a loss because I look at, okay, what did I do wrong? Like, did I buy at the wrong time? Did I not see the right signals? Did I not wait long enough to close it to allow it to get back up to where it needed to go? And then from that, I become a better trader. So every time that I lose $50,000, it actually means that the next time I'm going to make $50,000 that I wouldn't have made otherwise, because I'm not making the same mistake again. So we have to look at all of these things as experiments. We have to realize as a business owner, we're a freaking scientist. That's what we're doing. Yeah. And every single day, we're just taking experiments to see what's going to work. And exactly.
I love that idea of like being a scientist in your lab experiment. And I found like, just from my experience working with a lot of people, like some of lawyers did not do well and like in their firms for whatever reason, some of them blown up. I've noticed the ones who've blown up often are the very nicest people. They're just like so nice. And you're just like, oh, wow, you would never suspect like this person's like a multimillionaire from their firm because they don't carry themselves with an ego. But then, I also noticed their behavior was exactly what they thought of themselves as scientists. So we'll start with this and they say, this has worked, let's do more of it. Or like, this didn't work, we got to stop. And it's like, understanding why it is. And I think also taking responsibility. Like I always try and take responsibility when something doesn't go right in my business. I'm like, okay, well, you didn't like this white paper, or I ran over budget. Why is that? Like, what is the ultimate reason for it? And it's like often comes down to either a system didn't go well or you messed up somehow. And it's like owning that and telling people why it didn't work is always a good thing. But also it allows you to kind of be free from like, okay, well, like you said, I can learn from my successes and mistakes.
Yeah. And I want to come full circle to your thing with Jim Collins because, and Jim Collins is the one who wrote Who Not How, right? Or is he good? He's good to great.
Yeah, I don't. It sounds like he's definitely
who wrote Who Not How. I'm trying to remember now.
He was definitely a fan of that idea.
So anyway, Jim Collins, you said, fire bullets before cannonballs or not cannonballs. And I think that this is along the same lines, because yes, put on your scientist hat, take experiments, but do them in manageable small pieces. I think that that's the other key. Like if we go big or go home with everything we try, you can only be wrong so many times and you're out of business.
You run out of money.
But exactly, you run out of resources, whether it's money, whether it's time, whether it's, people, whatever it is, your resources are finite. And at some point you're going to run out of resources. But if you take smaller steps in your experimentation, then you'll have the resources to take the big step when it's time to go. Go back to my friend, he teaches other people how to be traders, and he tells them, look, you don't have to have a big account. And you're better off starting with a small account, because your mistakes are going to be smaller. If you start with a big account and you make a mistake, you could lose your whole account in one trade. And when you start smaller, you're going to manage your money better because you don't have anything, right? You know that I need to execute a few successful trades to grow this account where I can start to see something from it. And that's really where you need to approach this. Is my resources are so limited that I'm going to experiment, but I'm going to experiment in a really small fashion. So what do you think is the bare minimum somebody needs to do when it comes to a blog to say, I'm going to try this?
Yeah. I would say, I think like the bare minimum is 2 blogs a month. Well, it's going to be very slow. I would say, 1 a week is pretty tolerable. It's not that big of an investment, and see what happens with it. You can go bigger. I mean, I have this one client who does nearly 200,000 words of content a month. It's a ton of content. But a lot of people,
I'm nauseous thinking about it.
It's a lot of content, but I would say, I would say a blog a week is really good. I mean, you could want to try and go faster, 2 a week, and see where it lands you. And you take that time again to do bullets, not cannonballs. Say, okay, I'm going to try this out. It's going to work.
What kind of budget is a blog a week? What kind of budget is that?
I mean, it's like four blogs a week, around like $500, something like that.
You mean 4 a month?
Yeah, something like that. And again, if you can try to do something where like you can do fewer blogs. The blogging is another thing. It's like you can do longer blogs and do fewer of them. Sometimes if you've got like a kind of, if you're trying to do something more sophisticated, that might be the way to go. Other cases, like if you're doing personal injury, you might want to do fewer of them, but like have really cool, sexy titles for them all.
Right. You could also do a series. If it's a really long one, you can break it into 5 or 6 blog posts, and it's like to be continued. Oh, yeah. And at some point they all link to each other. And if somebody's really reading it, that gives you all kinds of juice in the algorithms to be like, oh, wow, this person's staying on site for so long and they're clicking through to the next page,
Yeah, you can do it that way too. I mean, and again, part of it is like matching like, what is the tone? What is the style? What are you doing with this? And then trying to figure out, okay, what's the minimum buy-in, the MVP, whatever, the table stakes. And then dialing that in and like, okay, you know what, this is working, you're liking it, then let's ratchet it up. Then now they'll go from once a week to twice a week. Let's add like some static pages. Let's do a white paper. Let's do this, and really kind of depends on where they're going with their marketing. What do they like? Some people will say like, I really have loved doing family law, but I really want to get into bankruptcy or estate. And so then now you kind of have to shift your whole thing. And like now so part of it is being responsive to their needs and kind of evolving over time with them.
Yeah. And let me ask you this. Is there specific practice areas that do better with blog posts than others? I mean, I imagine that, somebody who needs a criminal attorney, they're not going to start reading blog posts. They're going to be like, okay, who am I calling? Let me go click on the first link and first ad that comes up, and make my phone call. I can only get one call from jail or something, but there's other practice areas like family law where somebody is, they're contemplating divorce for months, if not years, before they actually execute. Right. So I imagine that certain practice areas do better with blogging than others. Do you have any sort
That's
of
a really good
on
question.
that?
Yeah. I mean, I will say that the people who tend to do blogging for would be criminal, estate planning, bankruptcy, family law, immigration, and I'm missing 1 or 2. Personal injury.
So what's interesting is those are all consumer facing, kind of like retail customer facing law firms. So you don't have any business to business in that list.
We do have, I mean, we do some business to business, a lot of like, I'm talking to entrepreneurs, some stuff, but I try to stay away from hyper. I mean, we do some, like, I don't know, SEC securities blogs, but yeah, it's interesting because the business to business stuff tends to be a little bit more highly specific. And even though we have great writers, I mean, people who've written for the New York Times and like the Washington Post and like who are really successful attorneys, but once you get into the place where you're like, I am literally the thought leader, people are like looking to me to do this, it becomes harder to ghostwrite. And what we do in those instances, we often interview people. We'll say, listen, we can't search the internet and come up with like things. We have to find out what's in your mind. So we'll interview them and then use that as seeds to write the blog posts. It's a little bit more tricky, but it works.
Right. Yeah, totally. And I can see where, business to business content could be, I mean, really valuable. Like, if I'm looking for a specific solution to a problem as a business owner, and, I'm going to search Google, I'm going to read articles about it before I even think about calling an attorney. So it almost seems like it's a better place to be blogging. But what I heard from your answer is there really isn't any practice area that you can think of where blogging doesn't work.
I mean, yeah, I would say, like, again, it really depends on what you're doing. I mean, it helps in general. And this is like the conventional wisdom on the internet, that it does help to put out content there. And I would say far more important than like the volume is the regularity of it. Like it's not going to help you to blog like a month or two and then stop. Like it's going to help you if you do, just like with your podcast, you've got to do it incrementally in a way that's sustainable. And then over time, all of a sudden you get this flood of things. And I mean, I have clients, this one DUI lawyer I work for, I've written since like 2009. He'll be like, oh yeah, I got a client from like a blog post you wrote in 2012. And it's like, oh, wow, that's cool. It's cool to see the stuff that you've already done, and that's why you put stuff out there in the world. And you try to make the blogs evergreen if you can, or interesting, so that, like, I'm always thinking about what is the reader thinking? Like, how is this, like, ultimately you want to think about the win-win, not to be like too corny, but like, what is the, like, if someone is like has a DUI that you love and they're typing in Google, like, what can I say to that person to make their lives better, to make sure they don't hurt anyone else, to like rehab them, and like in a way that has not been thought of before. And if you're constantly thinking, first them, then me. First, I want to make the reader happy and like their life better, and then they'll help my firm. I think that with lawyers too. First, how is like my services going to help the lawyer achieve their like the firm goals or their life goals, and then me.
Right. And this goes full circle back to what we spoke about at the beginning of this episode, which is, there's a difference between a writer and a marketer. Right. And the writing needs to be something that is entertaining, that answers a pain point, that produces an answer to a question that's being asked. It's the marketer's job to figure out, okay, once I've got eyeballs on this page, how do I then make those eyeballs call my firm? Right. And that's not something that you do. And I think it's really important to delineate and differentiate that. Like, creating content that's casting the net to kind of attract the people who are who you're gonna pull up onto the boat, right, when you're fishing. But once you catch the fish, what do you do with them at that point, right? How do you then prepare them and eat them, right? And I'm not saying you're eating your clients, but that's really what's happening, is like the content is just attracting people to come. And now that they're here in your pond, now you got to figure out, okay, how am I going to get them to take the next step with me? And that's where a good marketer would understand how, what's the right lead magnet to put out there, or what's the right offer, or what's the right way to get their eyeballs to go to the phone number or pick up the phone and call you. And for some, I mean, there's a lot of really cool, intuitive things that are happening, like self-service. We had a rally.io is a piece of software where, and I'm forgetting the name of the gentleman who I interviewed, but where you can literally have people create their own legal documents right on your website, and they can buy it. You have a shopping cart experience where they can buy it. So if you have this blog that's drawing people there, and then they see, oh, I could get this solved by just creating this document, and I could do it right now for $9.97 and have a lawyer sign off on it. That's a no-brainer. And that's, so you can parlay these different ideas that you're hearing about here on the podcast, put them together, and boom, you've got some real firepower going for growing your firm. So
Yeah,
really cool stuff.
no, I know we're running out of time, but I wanted to like jump on that thought because there's something that I think that's related. I think is important to understand about the power of content when it's done right, and into talking to what you just mentioned, which is that a good content writing can kind of decommodify your services. In other words, like if I'm a family law attorney, there's a million of them. I'm a bankruptcy lawyer, there's a million of them. So it's like, how do you distinguish yourself? And part of it is obviously kind of your unique selling proposition and what you're all about. But part of it is also like educating consumers to see the unique value of what you're doing and essentially to make sales superfluous. So they read this blog and they're like, this person really gets me. It's like imagine you go to the doctor and you're like, your elbow hurts and you gotta go, stuffy nose or whatever, you have like 16 symptoms, and the doctor immediately, you explain the first two symptoms and the doctor's like, oh, do you also have this? You have a disease called this, and here's what we do for it. Like where all of a sudden, you feel like you've been really heard and like in a unique way, like they understand my problem. And once you have that, you cease being a commodity, and now you can sell for more money, and you can get people to like you, which is like big thing. Like if they're like, oh wow, like I might not want to use the services now, but I like them, and my cousin gets in trouble, I'll send them to them.
Yep, absolutely.
Anyway,
absolutely. All right, well, we're just about out of time. This has been a great conversation. We were kind of all over the map, but the bottom line is that if you want to create a blog for your law firm, there is a way to do it that doesn't require you to put in the effort.
Right.
And we have to start getting good at allocating our resources appropriately. And when we look at our resources, we want to look at our time, and we want to look at our money, and we want to recognize that money can buy time, and time is the more valuable of the two.
Right.
And when we're approaching any of these conversations, we should not be approaching it from, can I afford this? It's almost like, oh, I need a new car, so let me figure out what monthly payment I can afford, and then I'm going to go buy a car, right? That's not the right way to approach the decision. It's, what kind of car do I need to meet my needs? And let me narrow down the criteria from there, and then let me figure out how I'm going to make it work financially. And I think that's the way you need to approach this, is what is the right way for my firm to approach our blogging initiative or our efforts? And if we don't have one now, like what is it that we want to do to test it, to try it, that's not going to break the bank, that's going to produce some results and put us on the map and get us started without it relying on me. One of the things that I like to highlight, there's a book by Michael Hyatt called Free to Focus, and in it he basically shares this idea where there's a 4-quadrant chart that you can draw to figure out where different tasks that you're doing fall. And essentially there's 2 criteria to measure. One is, how proficient am I at this? And the second is, how desirable is it for me to do this? So there's desirability and there's proficiency. And where you want to be focused on is where your desire is high and your proficiency is high. And that's the quadrant in the top right corner. And in the bottom left corner, you've got, I don't desire this at all, and I'm not proficient at it. And those are the things that you absolutely should not be touching, because you're going to hate it. You're going to abhor it. You're going to basically procrastinate the hell out of it, and it'll never get done. And if it's something important, one of the best examples is, for most business owners, bookkeeping. Most business owners don't like bookkeeping. They're not good at it. Yep. And if they sit there and futz around with it, they are wasting hours and hours of precious time, when literally for $200, $300, $400, $500 a month, you can have a bookkeeper do it for you, and just boom, I outsource it. By the way, if you're listening to this, you need a bookkeeper, send an email to info@dreambuilderfinancial.com, or we'll be happy to set you up with one. But that's a perfect example, because there are some oddball business owners who love the numbers, who want to get busy with bookkeeping, even though they're not good at it, which is one of the other 2 zones. I am not proficient, but I desire it. That's one zone. The other zone is, I'm really proficient, but I don't like doing it. And that's the third zone. And those 2 zones are the ones that you're going to find that you procrastinate those, or you're going to find that you get lost in it, right? So when the desirability is high, you're not good at it. you're going to waste time in that zone. When you don't desire it and you're really good at it, you're not going to waste time when you're doing it, but you're going to kick the can down the road and push off doing it. So what's going to happen is that if you're not in this perfect zone where I love what I'm doing and I'm really good at it, you're not going to be effective and efficient. And therefore, we need to evaluate this and recognize that this is probably something that I need to get off my plate, because I'm either not a good writer or I don't like writing. And therefore, I need to have somebody else do it for me.
Moshe,
So,
I just wrote that down. That's fantastic little heuristic. I love that. That's so cool.
yeah. And it works for a lot of things that we do. And I use that to help my clients figure out what they need to offboard and hire somebody for.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a really great exercise. What we do is put all the tasks you're doing in a spreadsheet and literally create 2 columns: desirability, proficiency, and you rate it 1 to 5. You put the total in the right, and then you start at the lowest number, and you start outsourcing those things, whether it's bringing somebody in, whether it's giving it to a contractor. And that's how you just really get efficient with your time. But going back to blogging, is unless you're really good at writing and you really love it, it's something that you want to outsource, because even if you have the time and you don't want to spend the money, you're going to waste time, or you're going to delay doing it, and therefore you're not going to be consistent with it.
Right. Yep.
And those are both challenges that are going to make this not a good solution for you. So whether it's working with Virtuoso or somebody else, I think that it's definitely something, if blogging is something that you feel is going to be a good step for your law firm, you definitely want to think about, how do I get this off of our plate? How do I get this to somebody else and just pay for it and get it done? Adam, where can people find out more about you? What is if they're sold, they're like, okay, I definitely need this in my life. What's the next steps for them?
So thank you again for the opportunity to reach to talk to your audience. I hope this has been helpful. I would say you can call me. My cell phone, I'm on the Pacific time, so don't call too early, is 818-601-6747. Maybe you can put this in the notes. And you can also email me, adam@virtuosocontent.com. You can also go to virtuosocontent.com to check out kind of our samples and a little bit about us. My website hasn't been updated in 4 years, so it's going to be just kind of some basic info. But one thing I'd be happy to do with anybody who's listening, I mean, if this would all be valuable for you, like as a kind of a free kind of consulting process, like you want to chat with me, I'm happy to spend 30 minutes with you for free. And that time can be spent just talking about your content. Even if you want to do it yourself or hire someone in-house, I don't care. I'm happy to kind of, as a service, do this. Or if you want me to say, hey, can you outline an editorial calendar for me? Here's my general, what I want to do. I will take time and I'll come up with a bespoke calendar. Or if you're like, I want to write a book, I can outline the book for you and come up with ideas in half an hour of time for free. And that might be helpful. I mean, depending on where you're at, any of those things I'm happy to do.
Oh, wow. That's amazing. And very kind and generous of you. So folks, will link up or actually put the phone number. We'll also give you, Adam, we can give out your email there as well.
Yeah, totally. And, the reason I do this, it does take me a lot of time to crack a book or an outline or blog post for some people. But I kind of figure, look, I mean, part of it is like karma. I feel like if I help a lot of people, that'll be useful. But also it's part of marketing, right? If I help 3 people with and I rate 3 books for people and only 1 hires me, okay, well, that's a return for me, but it's also then I'd help those other 2 kind of get something out of it too. So I always like to look for ways for it's easy for people to succeed.
Yeah. And you know what, I think that, I mean, that's the whole idea of content marketing, right? When we're writing blog posts, I'm putting this podcast out, we're putting in an effort, right? And we're providing free content, which there's going to be a ton of people who consume it for free and we never get anything for it. Yeah. And if you approach this with a that's a waste of time because I'm going to be giving out all this stuff for free and they're not going to be paying for it. You're not recognizing or realizing what real opportunity is. And that is ultimately why you here, ultimately why you do what you're doing. You're doing it to help people. You also want to make a living out of it, right? But there's a subset of people who are willing to pay for it, and there's a subset of people who aren't. And if you put it out there, then you're serving everybody. And
Serving
the
everybody,
subset who wants to pay for it, they're going to still come and pay for it. So it's an abundance mindset. And I love that. I really like that's where you approach this from. And that's really where, I think people need to see it that way in order to embrace these kinds of activities, these kinds of marketing activities. So, we don't have to beat a dead horse, right? Somebody made it this far in this interview, they're interested, right? They understand that, hey, I need to have some sort of content marketing strategy. And, how am I going to execute on that? Well, a marketing agency is going to be doing the marketing. They're going to be really good at that. But how do I produce the content that they're going to then deploy for me? And, that's where I think you come in, and it's a key component. And we mentioned one price, basically like a $500 budget for like once a week blogging, like that. To me, that's a no-brainer. Like that's $6,000 a year. For most of you, that's one client. For one, like an estate plan client or a basic DUI defense, or you look at your total book of business, and it's one, maybe two. For if you're doing bankruptcy, okay, maybe it's 5 chapter 7s, right? But that's all, and that covers your cost for the entire year to get this thing started and to try it and to start doing this consistent effort that's going to ultimately grow your business. So to me, it's it's like, when do I get started?
Well, I appreciate it. I think of it the same way, and one of the reasons that I've been able to keep a lot of clients is because of that kind of thing. Same thing. It's like, okay. And also make the experience pleasant. I mean, this is like, it doesn't have to be so painful. It doesn't have to be something you have to worry about. And part of it is like, it's like the peace of mind that comes from, okay, they've got it. And if I don't like it, I'm going to yell at them and they'll fix it. Like I don't have to, there's something to that, right? In the world.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Awesome. Adam, I got one last question for you. I like to leave with every guest. If you can share one piece of advice to our listeners, your last parting wisdom, could have absolutely nothing to do with anything we talked about. What is one piece of advice you'd like to share with law firm owners out there who are listening? They've joined us. They've listened to this conversation all the way to the end. And then now they're waiting for that golden nugget from you. What would that nugget be?
I got a good one.
Okay.
That which is most personal is most general. So if you feel something and you're like, I have a strong emotion about it, this is like really annoying me, or I love this, the chances are that there's a lot of other people like there who feel the same way you do. And I think if you take that mentality when it comes to trying to attract clients and you're trying to get in their minds, and maybe you're a criminal defense attorney, but you've never been arrested, or you're a bankruptcy attorney, but you've never gone bankrupt, or you're a family law attorney and you have a happy marriage. How do you get into the minds of your prospects? Well, you first start by understanding what do you feel, and being authentic to that, and being like, this really keeps me up at night. This is stressing me out. If I were in this situation, I would feel this, is always a great way to start. And not be afraid to think, because in some ways, like, look, we all want to think of ourselves as individual snowflakes, and we are. Like the details of our lives and our businesses matter, but in other ways, we're all humans. And so if you start from that idea of like, I'm a human being, this is what emotionally I'm feeling. This is what I would love someone to say or do for me. And you go from there, from that place of like, just like naked authenticity, it's going to help you. At least I believe so. And I try and do that with my life. So.
Yeah, I love that. I love that you shared that, but I want to add one piece to that. And that is that also recognize when it's impossible for you to feel that, to then properly interview some people who have, to try to understand how they feel. Because I will tell you, your example of divorce. I went through a divorce. Mm-hmm. There is a certain pit in the stomach. There is some feeling of dread, impending doom, that happens over and over again throughout that divorce process that I never felt before and never felt after. And there's no way I could have, having not gone through it, like before that, there's no way I could have envisioned or described what somebody like that would be feeling. And I think that you also need to recognize when there's no way that you would know how they feel, and you would have to have conversations on the emotional side with your clients to really understand that. And you have no shortage of test cases, right? So if you're a family law attorney, there's people coming in every day going through divorce. All you need to do is tell them, look, I want to talk to you for 30 minutes and it's off the clock.
Yeah.
I'm not charging you for it. Relax. I just want to have a conversation. How's life?
Yeah.
Like, how are you feeling? Like when you wake up every day, what are your stressors? And start to just ask them these questions to really get an insight of what they're going through, because that will really help you step into their shoes. We have an interview on the podcast by Jim Armstrong. I'm going to pull up the episode right now. Have you heard of Jim Armstrong?
No, but maybe.
So Jim Armstrong started a company called Family of the Accused. And basically, it's a support organization for people who have been, family of people who have been accused of a crime. So basically, his wife, her son, so his stepson, was accused of a crime, and in a different state. So they had to navigate how to get him the defense he needed. Why? And it was a serious crime. So he describes what it was like, the feeling that they had, the bewilderment, the confusion, the disbelief that he was accused of this crime, or that maybe even worse, that he might actually be guilty of it. And he walks through this whole process of looking for an attorney when it was out of state. They didn't have a network of contacts to talk to find the person, and they had to find the best attorney for their family member. And this is a real raw, gut-wrenching episode if you want to listen to one that's really going to tug at your heartstrings. But it also highlights the idea that you really need to understand and step into the shoes of your client to be able to talk to them on a level and treat them on a level that's going to draw them in. And it starts with your blog post, it starts with your marketing, but it also has to do with your intake experience. Like what are you doing when they walk through the door in your office? How are you treating them? How are you talking to them? How are you being compassionate to them with what they're going through? So that episode is episode 150, profitwithlaw.com/150. To achieve success, spend a day in your client's shoes with Jim Armstrong. And we're going to end this interview. This has been a great conversation. And folks, if you listen to this and you're like, wow, this is great, I need more of this. Perfect. You're in the right place. Hit the subscribe button in your podcast player so that you get notified every time we release a new episode. We're here a minimum of twice a week, every Tuesday and Thursday. On Tuesdays, it's yours truly. I am here sharing great information with you, or sometimes it's a waste of your time. I don't know. I just share with you what's on my mind at the time, and hopefully you're getting value from it. But on Thursdays, I'm always bringing you a guest, and no matter what the topic, no matter who it is, our guests always bring a ton of value, because nobody can express the experience of someone else. And everyone's got their experiences, and all those experiences are valuable. So if I could take somebody's experience and help highlight it for 30, 45 minutes, an hour with you, and you can learn from that and become a better law firm owner, then we've done a great job. And I think we're doing just that. So folks, hit the subscribe button, share this episode with a friend, somebody who can gain value from it. Share the love. We love if you share it with somebody, they might share it with somebody, and it creates this beautiful circle of love and circle of sharing with each other. And with that, I will see you next Tuesday. Take care.
Have you been enjoying the show? We sure hope so. To make sure you never miss an episode, be sure to hit the subscribe button in your podcast player app. Next week, we will be back with more valuable resources and ideas on how to break the mold and take your law firm to the next level.